Hello everyone, my name is Nabila Fitria. My student number is 060 and I'm from class 4B. So, in this video, I want to present a summary and connection of 10 great articles that I read during this semester. Honestly, I really love English literature, especially poetry, so that's why all my 10 articles are about literature. Let's start with the first article about the condition of literature in Indonesia. So for the first article is by Novita Dewi titled Studying English Literature in Indonesia, Challenges and Opportunities. This article talks about how teaching literature in Indonesia shouldn't be boring and focused to human values. The big strength of this article is that it gives a good solution for using technology in literature learning. But for the limitation, it doesn't give a real plan or module that teachers can use directly. And this article inspires me that literature can build good character. Now, to make a human curriculum, we can look back at history where feelings were very celebrated, which brings us to the second article about romantic poetry. And second article is by M. Rahman titled An Overview of the Romantic Age, Romantic Poets and Romantic Poetry in English Literature. This article explains the history of the Romantic era, where literature changed from hard logic to deep emotions and love for nature. It talks about famous poets like Wordsworth, Coleridge, and etc. with his beautiful concept of negative capability. The strength is this article very simple and easy to understand, but the limitation is that it only talks about male poets and ignores female writers from that time. This story helps me understand emotion in old poetry, but how do we actually teach these poems to students? The answer is the third article. For the third article is by Hamintek titled A Review on Instructing English Through Literacy Genre. This article states that teaching English using literature like poetry and dramas is much more fun than just textbook. The strength is that it gives practical tips for teachers, like how drama can build students' confidence. But for the limitation is it doesn't show any ready-to-use lesson plans, so teachers still have to create everything themselves. This article gives me a clear idea of how to teach dynamically. But while this article talks about traditional teaching, our fourth article shows how modern technology can help us study poetry differently. Next one, fourth article is by Andes titled Searching for Latin River Cultures in English Language Literature Using Word Embeddings. So this article, interesting paper, checks how the descriptions of rivers in first and 20th century novels have changed because of modern technology and tap water. The big strength is that method called distant reading, using a digital tool named Words to Fact. And for the limitation is that digital data can miss the deep emotional symbols that humans find when reading additionally. It opens my mind about digital trends in literature, but if technology handles to surface data, how do we see the hidden psychology inside the text? So let's look at the fifth article. Next, fifth article is by Mathruf, titled Psychoanalytic Theories in English Literature Descriptive Study. So this paper talks about how Sigmund Freud's psychological theories like the unconscious mind can be used to read hidden meanings and understand characters in stories. The strength is that it gives a clear framework to analyze four areas: the author, the character, the text, and also the reader. But the limitation is that it relies too much on old Freudian views that focus too much on sex and are less inclusive. This article helps me understand the feelings when analyzing poems to find these hidden psychological meanings. A student must think critically, which brings us to the sixth article. Next, move sixth article, titled Effectiveness of Critical Thinking Skills for English Literature Study with Reader Response Theory. This article states that studying literature must be combined with critical thinking and reader response theory so students can connect the text with their own life. The strange is that it beautifully education connects that shows how reading builds a student's personal growth, but for the limitation is that it's only a library review, so it doesn't have real experiment data from a school. This proves that literature can train independent minds, but can real teenage students analyze difficult old poetry? The seventh articles will give the answer. Next, seventh article by Naylor, titled Old Poems Have Heart, Teenage Students Reading Early Modern Poetry. This research shows that teenage students in England can actually understand and enjoy complex poetry if teachers support them well. So the strange proves teenagers love old poems because they can relate to sad themes like that and loss. But for the limitation is the small sample size, which only in full 4 students in one school. This gives me good ideas for making poetry fun, but what happens if a sudden crisis like a pandemic forces face-to-face classes to go online? So let's check this out on the 8th article. Move to 8th article, titled Challenges of Online English Literature Learning and Assessment in Private University of Bangladesh during COVID-19. So this paper details the experiences of literature students during online learning, like bad connection and also bad headache to look screen for a long time. The trend is that it keeps clear charts and reveals that literature students prefer writing than online learning. And for the limitation is the researchers had no funding, so they couldn't interview students in person. This shows me that alternative assignments are important during crisis, but internet issues are not the only problem. In some poor countries, basic books are missing, as seen in the 9th article. Next, 9th article, titled The Challenges Facing Effective Teaching of Literature in English in Nigerian Secondary Schools. This study talks about an institutional problem in Nigeria where a lack of money, lack of teacher, and lack of libraries cause high failure rates for students in literature exams. So the main trend is detailed data tables and its clear focus on both teacher and students' problem. But for the limitation is that it only covers one small area in Nigeria, so it cannot represent the whole country. This reminds me that as a future teacher, I must be creative, find cheap materials when researchers are low. This big responsibility leads us to final article about teachers training. The final article, titled Pre-Service Teachers Beliefs About Literature Integration in English Language Teaching Classroom. So this long study tracks the beliefs of 65 future teachers in Turkey and finds out that 2-semester teachers training course did not change their old habits because they still preferred short stories or poetry and only taught basic grammar. The strange from this article is long-term research designed across 2 full semesters, proving that a person's old habits as a learner are hard to change. And for the limitation is that it only uses questionnaires without observing real classroom. This article warns me to always be critical of my own methods so that I don't use old, boring ways in the future. For the conclusion, from all of these 10 articles have a beautiful connection. To build a creative literature in class, in Indonesia of course, we need to understand the deep emotion of romantic poetry and use active reader response theories. Even when we face technology changes, online crises, or low facilities like in Bangladesh or Nigeria, as I already told you guys before, teachers' mindset are critical training are the ultimate keys to successfully using poetry and stories to build students' character. These insights are very useful for my future career. So thank you so much for your time and have you guys have a great day. Bye bye!